Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Pre-Health Application Week at UCLA. We have tons of events planned for this week, and I'm going to go through them a little bit. But before I do that, I just want to let everybody know that we at the Career Center have a lot of resources and services for pre-health pre-med students. So we have online the website, the UCLA website. We have the UCLA Pre-Health UCLA Facebook page. You can come for counseling. We have counseling sessions. You can book them through your Handshake account. We have pre-health drop-ins on Fridays. Those are virtual between 12 and 1. The link for the Zoom you're going to be able to find on the pre-health website. We also have pre-med pre-health workshops, webinars just like this one. We have a lot of events coming up this week in particular, but also for the rest of the spring quarter. Since it's med school application week, we're going to have tons of MCAT stuff coming up and some other great workshops in May, for example. Newsletters, recorded workshops. This is going to be one of the recorded workshops, and it will be added to the pre-health, to the Career Center's YouTube channel, and you're going to be able to find it there. However, we're not going to record the breakout room, so if you want to get the full experience, you may want to stay on this call. So here are the pre-health application week events. So tomorrow we have the how to ace the Casper preview test. We have suturing workshop courtesy of Western University. Christopher Wu, thank you so much for organizing this for us. We have the health school fair coming up also virtually on Wednesday between 12 and 3. We have several schools. That you admissions people from many schools that you can talk to. We also have a very good presentation, very interesting presentation that I've been inviting back for years now from Rob Humbrecht, the Wow Factor, how to choose the right pre-health activities for you. I find it very inspiring and hope you will too. The Global Health Living and Learning Community is hosting a pre-health mentorship matchup in person in Covell. And on Thursday, we have Building a Successful MCAT Study Plan in person in room 200 here at the Career Center, Kaplan, courtesy of Kaplan Test Prep. And UCLA's EMS team is hosting a CPR and first aid class and an ambulance tour later in the afternoon, 4 to 5:30. So hope to see you at some of these events. When you see that you can win an MCAT textbook, we are raffling off a textbook bundle every day. So if you want to participate in those raffles, all you need to do is attend those events, and I'm going to let the winner know via email if they won the MCAT textbook. Speaker panel, thank you very much everybody for being here today. So we have Jam Harley representing David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA, Agasia Lanier from Kaiser Permanente's Medical School, Michael Richards from USC, Marker David Priolo from University of Arizona, and Christopher Wu is the Western University's DO program prep. So we have 4 MD and 1 DO program. So without further ado, let's dive into questions. And I always start with MCAT because that's always something that I get tons of questions about. So those are some of the questions I hear from students. What if students are taking the MCAT for the first time in July? Should they still apply early? What if students will be retaking the MCAT after applying? Should they still, how they would let you know if they have another score coming up? How many times should students take the MCAT? I got that question today, just like 15 minutes ago. So let me see who's on my screen first. Let's go with Agasia first.
I get those questions all the time too. Well, let's start with the first one. What if a student is taking the MCAT for the first time in July, and should they still apply early? Short answer, yes. Yes, you should. You can still apply, and you can actually put the date in your primary application of when you are taking your MCAT. So pretty much all the schools will be able to see that. So I think that's going to also apply to the next question. But yes, you should still apply early, at least for my school. I think my colleagues might say the same thing.
Anybody wants to chime in? Mark, Jam, Michael?
Yeah, I can. Oh, is
Okay.
Michael speaking? Okay, I'll go quickly. So we do in our screening process, we do require an MCAT score for your application be considered complete. So just kind of an FYI, you can submit early, as Agasia mentioned, but it's not going to be necessarily pushed for screening until all the required items, including your MCAT score, is inputted in our system. And we take an MCAT score all the way until our deadline, which is usually in October. So any score after that will probably be reviewed a little bit later and will affect your application because of our rolling admissions process.
For the Keck School of Medicine, we don't send out the secondary invitation or the invitation to complete our secondary application until the MCAT score is posted. So yeah, your application won't be reviewed until we receive the completed full application with the posted MCAT score. Yeah.
And how many times do you think students should take the MCAT?
I think less the better.
Yeah, of course.
I think 2 times that's a good number to at least stop and regroup at, you know, because if you take it too many times and you don't do significantly better, it can raise a flag. It can make a reviewer a little leery about maybe your preparation or your ability to ask for help and maybe get some advice. Because most people that retake the MCATs, they usually don't score more than a couple of points higher, and sometimes they even score lower. So yeah, I'd say 2 max.
Do you have a limit? Anybody has a limit on how many MCAT scores you review? Okay. Christopher,
I know that the
Yeah.
lifetime limit to retake the MCAT is 7, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
So that's the absolute limit. Anyone can retake it anyways. But at Western University, we do things a little bit differently. I feel from other medical schools is we actually review the application, the primary application. As long as you put that you have a pending MCAT on your application, then we will go ahead and review it. Make sure you have everything else, and then we'll push you forward for the committee to do a further review. And then once they review it, we'll still send you a secondary as long as you have a pending MCAT. So as long as we know that you're intending to take an MCAT, then we'll still push you, excuse me, forward so that you can start filling out your secondary, get everything in, and then by the time you have your MCAT done, we can, you know, push you into further consideration for an interview. So we do things a little bit differently. And whether you're applying extremely early, if you wanted to submit your application back May 5th when the application cycle opens, or if you want to wait and you know, submit your application after you retake the MCAT, that's absolutely fine too, because we are on a rolling admissions basis. So technically we're reviewing, we're interviewing and doing all of that stuff year round. So obviously applying as early as possible is recommended, but you can, you know, opt to apply later on once you've either, you know, completed your retake, or if you have a pending MCAT, you could always submit early, get all the review process out of the way, and then once you submit your MCAT, you can go for further review for interview.
Mark, do you have anything to add on the MCAT topic?
Yes, just a couple of things. I think, like everyone said, you know, if you haven't taken the MCAT at the time you apply, that's certainly okay. I would, you know, still submit the primary application, because again, you have to consider that AAMC still has to go through the verification process. And so that could take 4 to 6 weeks, which is about the same time it takes for that MCAT score to hit your application anyway. So it'll be good to kind of work on that early on anyway. The other thing about the kind of number of times you should take the MCAT, we don't have a, kind of a cutoff, if you will. We're actually looking, this is my personal recommendation. You probably don't want to take the MCAT, get your score, and then sign up for the next available test date. If you seriously want to consider improving your score, it's probably going to take you just as long to study for that initial or for that retake as it did for you for the initial, if you really want to significantly improve your score. So, something else to consider when you're thinking about taking the exam multiple times.
Thank you very much. LORs. So I'm sure you have questions about this still. So how many LORs do you accept, and how should students, who should students ask for LORs? Because every school is a little bit different of how many and from whom they want to see. And how are LORs used in your application review process? So, Jam, do you want to start off this one?
Sure. So for letters of recommendation, we take minimum of 3, maximum of 5. So that's definitely pay attention to that frame, because anything under that is not considered complete. Anything beyond that, we're not going to even review anything past 5. And then one difference, I think, for us then compared to some schools is that we don't have a specific requirement who the writers are when it comes to them being academic versus non-academic, science, professors, etc. So ours, we would just highly encourage anybody to ask letter of recs from people and professionals who can write them a strong letter that can speak about their goals and their skills and interests. We do have some recommendation and what the titles of those people might be, like your mentor, PIs, advisors, all that stuff. But and one thing to note, we view committee letters as just one letter that only fulfills 1 out of the 3 requirement for us. So even though there's 10 letters in that, that's counted as 1. And we do use the letter of recs very heavily, like anything else in the application, as part of our holistic process.
Thank you. Christopher, for a DO program, how LORs work?
So we do require 2 letters of recommendations. We don't have a cap. I do like to recommend that you submit, around 5 to 6 letters of recommendations if you have them. Some of our students only have the 2 required ones. We require a science letter of recommendation and a physician letter of recommendation, and that's to serve one main purpose, is to see how you are in a clinical setting and how you are in an educational setting, in a classroom setting. But we don't technically have a cap on letters of recommendations. So what I like to advocate my applicants to do is, quality over quantity. So it's more of, like, I guess, who can write you a really, really good letter of recommendation, and I'd rather have my applicants come in with, only 2 or 3 strong letters of recommendations versus 6 or 7 just okay letters of recommendations. So depending on, who and, how they're able to write your letter of recommendation, it could vary between, only 2 letters of recommendations all the way up to 6, 7, 8, or 9. But because our committee members do read every single letter of recommendation, I would recommend that you keep it to 5 or 6.
Do you have a recommendation on getting a letter from a DO?
So as far as DOs go, DOs are few and far between, and they're generally very busy. So I believe the last time I looked, there's only about 60% of our incoming students that have DO shadowing and DO letters of recommendations. So the main way that they obtain that is essentially just, cold calling all the DOs in their surrounding area and then asking to see if they can shadow. If you're local to Pomona, we do have a patient care center with DOs on staff. And if they do have time, then they are able to allow you to shadow sometimes. So that is one method of obtaining, DO shadowing and the DO letter of recommendation. But because we know that it's so hard, we don't make it a requirement to have DO shadowing or DO letters of recommendations, but it's more of, I would like to call it extra credit for your application if you do have it. And if you don't have DO shadowing or DO letter of recommendation, then it's not going to hinder your application in any way.
Okay. Agasia, what's the case at Kaiser?
Okay, so speaking just for our school, we accept a minimum of 3, a maximum of 6 letters of recommendations. Same as UCLA, if you submit beyond that, we are not going to review. A little different, we do accept the committee letter or committee letter or committee packet. That's also if you're not submitting individual letters, so we will accept that to complete your admission file. Pretty much you can ask who you would like. We don't have a preference or a requirement. We would like to see, in other words, everybody except for family members and friends. I mean, that should be obvious, but I'm going to say it. No, no family members, no friends, even if those family members or friends are in healthcare. And as far as how they're used in your application review process, very heavily, it is something that the file reviewers and our committee looks at. Something I would like to point out, and I've been talking to several students as we're doing some feedback appointments now after decisions have gone out. Some of our file reviewers say they really like to see a connection between the activities you're listing in your application to letters of recommendation. So if you're listing activities, it would be really nice to see letters of recommendations from those activities as well. So I want to point that out because we've been getting that a lot from our file reviewers as well.
Michael, Mark?
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. Yes, at the Keck School of Medicine, we require letters of recommendation. We give you the option of either submitting a committee letter or individual letters. And if you submit the committee letter, we ask that you not send any additional individual letters. And if you submit the individual letters, we ask that you submit no more than at least 2, no more than 3 letters. And they can be from any one of your choosing.
Mark?
And for College of Medicine Phoenix, we 3 to 5 is our requirement for letters of recommendation. We don't have specific people they need to come from, although we do strongly encourage you get a letter from somebody within a clinical setting that you've worked with. There's a couple of things that that our committee's looking for in those letters. It's obviously a holistic review, as a lot of my colleagues have mentioned, but we're looking specifically at some of the attributes that we value in our future students and future physicians in general. We have those quality or characteristics listed on our website if you want to go check that out. But then also we're looking for specifically on that clinical letter, if you're able to provide one, they really want to know, what would it be like to have you as a colleague? So in that clinical setting, what skills and, kind of attributes have you shown that would make you a great colleague to have within the healthcare profession? So a little bit more specifically what they're looking for.
Thank you for that. And let's see what's next. Coursework. So we've been hearing rumors too, but I'm going to start with the things that I get from freshmen. How do you feel about AP credits? And then from transfer students, I often get the question, what's going on with community college courses? And then pass, no pass coursework that was brought by COVID. And then online classes, because we've been hearing then some schools start not to accept certain online courses. It has to be in person. So how, let's start with Mark.
Sure. Again, for College of Medicine Phoenix, we do accept AP credit. And then for anything beyond that, as long as a course is completed at a regionally accredited college or university, we're going to review that for credit for our process. In terms of the pass, no pass, we have and still continue to make exceptions during that COVID period, that spring 2020, fall 2020. Beyond that, if it is a prerequisite for our admission process, we do want you to take it for a letter grade because we do require a C or better in order to meet that requirement.
But let's say if it's not a required course, it's something completely different, like a psych or social, whatever that is not required.
Yeah, that's a great question. Then it's up to the student. I mean, that's not going to factor into our review if it's not a prerequisite. And, there's no kind of limit as to how many past courses could be on a transcript. We're not going to get any, kind of picky about that. And the same goes for online classes. As long as it's a regionally accredited institution, students can take a class in person or online.
Perfect. Okay, Christopher.
So we're essentially very similar. The answer is essentially yes to all the questions. The only difference is for our prerequisites, there are required labs for the core sciences. So courses such as biology, IChem, OChem, physics, we do require you to have at least one lab, and the lab has to be done in person. So all the other classes can be taken online, but the lab portion of the class has to be taken in person. But we do accept AP credits, community college credits, pass, no pass, as long as it's taken at a regionally accredited institution.
Jam?
Same thing as Mark and Christopher mentioned, yes to all of these questions. And one thing we do have is we don't have traditional prerequisite, if you want to call it like that. We are in a competency-based process. So we have I'll link the list of competencies that you would want to show that we would like to see during your college coursework. But again, it doesn't matter, same thing that Christopher thought, it doesn't matter if it doesn't affect your grade anyway and things like that. That's up to you to decide that. But otherwise for us, as long as you are showing competency in the different items that we specify in our competency list, then that's fine with us.
Agasia?
Pretty similar to all the other schools. The only thing that I would add that would be specific to Kaiser Permanente School of Medicine, while we do accept online coursework, we do not accept a degree. So if your degree is completely done online, that's one thing that our committee is not willing to accept. But online coursework is okay. Pass, no pass coursework is okay during the COVID period, which I know we're going to be updating that very soon. So if you got that, get it in now. And yes, community college coursework from regionally accredited, basically coursework from a regionally accredited institution is perfectly fine. AP credit is fine as well.
And Michael, before I ask a follow-up.
Yeah, at the Keck School of Medicine, it's yes to all of those. We actually do not have any specific prerequisites that we require for application eligibility. So we leave it up to the applicant to kind of craft their own preparation for med school. But yeah, we will evaluate all of those courses, community college courses, pass, no pass, online courses will be, if they're on your record, they will be included in the evaluation.
I just thought of something, because sometimes students, especially transfer students, are asking me this, that they come in with certain science classes, but then sometimes they are not coming in necessarily as full science majors. So they may not have the time to complete something that is left off at UCLA. So they're going to go back to their community college to finish off some classes. So it doesn't really matter when they attended those community college classes, right? Okay.
No, it doesn't. You know, once they submit the application, obviously anything after that won't be on their record. But no, it doesn't matter when. You know,
Okay.
and our reviewers are basically just trying to gauge their preparation for the medical school curriculum. So it's yeah, we let them prepare in the way that best suits their individual circumstances.
And I get a lot of questions of coursework. Some didn't fit here, but I'm gonna ask that. How do you so sometimes, okay, if they don't take a gap year, they're not gonna have their senior year on it. So are you okay as long as you know all the prereqs are done at the time of your application? It's okay that they are not graduated yet, that they don't have the sometimes they because UCLA is on quarter system, they're not going to even necessarily have their spring quarter grades on there. So if all of that is fine, right?
Yeah, that's fine, definitely fine at the Keck School of Medicine, as long as they will have completed their degree by the time they enter our program. If they're accepted, then that will be fine.
And I see a lot of nods. So it's the same. Okay, very good. We are getting through these quickly. You guys are doing great. So Casper and Preview. Lots of confusion about these two. So do you require them? When should students take them? How are these task scores used in the application review process? So Jam, I know David Gaffin is asking at least for the preview.
Yes-ish. So there we have we have 3 different tracks that you can apply for, and right from the start you have to specify which one of the 3 tracks are you applying for. And if you're applying for the MD only track, which is our biggest class, it does require you to have a previous score. And same as MCAT, that score has to be recorded prior to our application deadline of October.
Okay.
So that might answer that question of when they should take it is before the deadline, as long as they have. And again, it is a requirement for the MD track only program. And if they don't have that before October, then they won't be reviewed. And as so far as from what I heard from my pathway students, my pre-med students, that they need to book almost 6 months before to even make sure they have a date that will make it for the cycle. So just something to keep in mind.
And the Casper is not required, right? And can you tell me a little bit about how this score is used in the review application process?
So we view everything almost in, I mean, they all have the same weight, if that makes sense. And it will give us a different insight about the applicant, which contributes to the overall perspective we're going to get about that person. And so that just adds into that file, that file that we have about that person. But it does give you a little bit of an insight about them and their perceptions and things.
Okay, thank you. Christopher, do you guys require any of it?
Yeah, so we actually only require the Casper exam. So with the Casper exam, I do recommend that my students take it when they submit their primary. Technically, you don't need it until, Technically, you don't need it until you receive your secondary, because the Casper doesn't come into play until you're getting reviewed for the interview or an invitation to interview. However, students need to keep in mind that Casper test does take up to 3 weeks for us to receive and process and get into your application. So the sooner that we get it, the sooner we can move you along to be reviewed for an interview. So at least with my students, I'd like to recommend that they take the Casper exam when they're planning on submitting their primary, just so that there isn't really a delay when it comes to processing and inviting to interview. As far as how the test scores are used in the application review process, because we do review everything as holistically as possible, we do take it into consideration. But it's taken into consideration among a whole lot of other gambits of your application. So it's not one of the, I guess, metrics that we use to say, oh, well, this person isn't going to be competitive enough. I don't think I've ever seen a time where the committee straight up says, oh, well, they didn't do well on the MCAT, but they did well on everything else, so we're not going to admit them. So it's not something that's heavily weighed, because we technically don't assign weights to any aspect of the application, but it is just one more tool under the admissions committee's tool belt in order to gauge how an applicant reacts during certain situations. Essentially is what it is.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, currently we don't require Casper or Preview or any of the other situational judgment tests that might be out there. And there's no talks about having that as a requirement in the future, but any updates we will certainly put on our website. So keep an eye on that.
Agasia?
We do not require Casper or Preview or any other exam as well. We actually got rid of our Casper requirement after our first class, but I will say this, there is discussion that could be coming back, not this upcoming cycle for 2024, but possibly 2025, and we would update everyone if that does take place. But personal note, I am not a fan.
Students aren't either, as far as I can tell. Michael?
No, we don't require that. nor do we evaluate on that at all.
That's awesome. I didn't realize. I mean, I know that the number of schools that are requiring one or the other or both are going up, but good to know that it's not quite a requirement across the board just yet. All right, so letters of intent and interest. That's another biggie. When they are not receiving interview invitations, they start to worry. And do you accept letters of intent or interest? When should students send them if you do? What they should include in those? And will these letters impact their application review in any way? So, Michael, because I think you have a short answer to that, if I remember correctly.
That is true. We don't necessarily accept letters of interest. People send them all the time, but we figure that if your application is still active and you haven't withdrawn, that you're still interested in being considered. We do accept letters of interest from people that have been that are on our wait list, who've interviewed with us, and they've been placed on the wait list. On April 30th, they can send a letter of intent to let us know that they still want to be considered for admission. But
what are some of the things that you would like to see in that letter?
You know, you're going to laugh at this one. Our Dean of Admissions tells our applicants in the interview process to send a brief letter or a brief note in the body of the email, and it can be as short as, "Take me, I will come." So no, you know, we don't need any updates to your application material or anything like that. We just want to know that you're still interested in being considered.
All right, Agasia?
I have actually seen letters that said, "Take me, I will come." And I do consider that, like, well, they're clearly interested. I agree with Michael, everything he said in regards to letters of interest versus letter of intent. For us, we do not accept unless you have interviewed. You can send letters of interest after you have interviewed, and we will tell you that on interview day. So we'll remind you that that is a possibility. But those that do send beforehand, we just send you a lovely email saying thank you so much. But if you are, invited to interview, you can do that then. Does it impact the review process? It does. If you are on the wait list, we do consider, letters. And I also like to say I believe in multitasking. So if you could make that letter of intent interest like a update letter, that'd be really nice because we want to know what you've been up to since you last applied. But yeah, it does impact, and we do consider that. And actually, we're starting to get a lot of those now from those that are on our wait list.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, it's very similar to what everybody's said already. We do accept letters of interest or intent. They really only become relevant once you get to that interview stage and maybe you're waitlisted. We don't accept updates throughout the cycle unless you're on the wait list. So, at that point, if in your letter of interest, letter of intent, and you're on the wait list, you want to include that you've, finished a graduate program or, worked in a lab or anything like that, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, in either case, we don't send that information forward to our admissions committee, so they don't get the details of that. But it does help us know that you're out there, that you're still interested, and that we can continue to consider you in our process.
Christopher?
So we do accept letters of intent and letters of interest. They are generally letters that are sent after you interview, letting the committee know that if you are offered a seat in the class, then you fully intend on attending the university. Of course, that's the purpose of the letter. And we do also accept update letters throughout the cycle. The easiest way to update your application is always going to be going through the application service. You can always update the application. They can send us the update, but you could always email us as well if you have any updates, and we can also add them to your application. So either way, you can submit any type of update letters, intent letters, or anything of the sort at any time.
Thank you. Jan?
Also, short answer is no, we do not accept. I feel bad now because everybody seems to No, we don't accept any letters of intent, update letters, however you want to call it, at any point of the process, even if you are waitlisted. And one thing to add there that might touch into the letter of recommendation, because we see that as well, of more LORs come in case it would help. And the answer for that is also no. So any other LOR submitted after the fact, it will not be accepted either way, but letters of intent, we will respond to what we can, especially if you're asking for timeline, things like that. But it doesn't go anywhere beyond that response, and it is not forwarded to any committees at all.
So since many of you mentioned waitlist, I forgot to put in a question about waitlist. So can you tell me a little bit about how students can get off the wait list and getting a space in the cohort? So let's start with Mark.
You have to hope that other people say no. That's the long and short of it, really. Other than that, for us, again, we do accept those letters of interest, so it does help. We don't rank our wait list. So again, knowing that somebody's interested, that they're connected with our community, and that they, have some interest beyond just being accepted to a medical school, that's going to really help a student in our waitlist process.
I am going to add one more little detail to that question. How many people do you place on the wait list? If you can disclose that. So Mark.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I won't put exact numbers on it, but we usually place as many students on our wait list as we admit. So it's a pretty sizable wait list.
Okay, perfect. Christopher?
So the waitlist process at our university is essentially, the waitlist obviously starts later on once the class starts filling up. And again, we never really interview for waitlist positions itself. If we're interviewing, then there's spots in the class. But in order to move in the waitlist, because the committee does do periodic reviews of our waitlist, any sort of updates such as clinical experience, shadowing, any volunteerism, because Western University does pride itself a lot on humanism and local community outreach to underserved, underrepresented populations. So things like that will help move your application, whether it's up or down or whatever the case. So the things that you do in order to prepare your application for the initial submission, you should continue doing throughout the whole process. And then any updates that you may have, even after you've been waitlisted, alternate, whatever the case, any kind of update will assist in moving you up or down, depending on the rest of the people that are in the waitlist or alternate list. So constant updates is something that I would definitely recommend.
Thank you. John, what's up with the Digison waitlist?
We can't disclose how many. It really depends almost every year. And then same as what Mark said, the movement depends on the movement of acceptance for the students that are already being accepted, and that's when movement will start happening. And one question we always get emailed is, what rank am I? And that's something we don't have as well, and cannot disclose rankings or anything like that. And so it really, once you're in the wait list, that as long as you didn't get a rejection letter, you're still in the running, and that's good news. So
thank you. Agasia?
I've been getting this question a lot too. So we do not rank our wait list. As far as numbers go, I can't give a definite actual number, but I can say our wait list is pretty comprehensive. That helps. So it's a pretty large wait list. You know what, my advice, if you have some friends that have been admitted to several schools and they know for a fact they are not going to that school, please withdraw. Just, be courteous to other people. There are plenty of people that are just waiting for that opportunity to accept. So that's one thing I could say. I know that my colleagues are nodding their heads as well. I know today is a very big day. If you're on a list and you're thinking about withdrawing, please do that. Help us out. I would say, you know, and I've been sharing this with my students that are on waitlist as well. This is a really good time to actually submit those letters of intent, those letters of interest. That helps us out. Me as an admission counselor, I get those calls from my dean of admissions saying, okay, who's really interested? And those people, I keep a list. So if you're not submitting those, how would I know if you're still interested? So yeah, that's actually very helpful to submit those during that time when you're on a wait list. And what you want to include in that is obviously your interest, sharing any updates that you may have, and it's okay to say, please admit me, I will come.
Michael?
Yeah, pretty much our policy is pretty much the same as everyone else has mentioned. Our wait list, it's not ranked at all. And the people on the wait list by the end of the cycle are all people who otherwise would have been accepted, but we just didn't have enough spots. And then so like right now, you know, people are declining our offer. You know, and pretty close to April 30th, we're going to start utilizing people or calling people from the wait list. So, and we'll see. I don't know how many we'll take off of the wait list. It varies from year to year, but every year it seems like there are pretty decent number of people come off of the wait list.
Thank you. So we wrapped two things at once. And reapplication. So that's a biggie because now students are starting to come in. I want to reapply, and they barely finished. They're not, we didn't even finish technically the application season, and we are gearing up for another one. I have students who are okay with waiting a year, but there are some that are anxious to do it all over again pretty much right away. So I'm always a little concerned of what we can change in the application that will make it a new kind of thing. So what are you looking for when a student is a reapplicant to your program? Is there any difference the way you look at the reapplication when you already seen, of course, an application that's probably very similar if they are reapplying right away? And what advice would you share with reapplicants in general? So let's start with Christopher.
Sorry. So when an applicant is reapplying for a second or third cycle, I always recommend that you continue to, you know, obviously improve on your application. You don't want to reapply with the same application that you initially submitted. But obviously, you know, more academics is definitely a good thing, especially if it helps your application and puts it in an upward trend. But again, the community outreach, clinical experience, shadowing, all that is very, very important. That it's a very important action that you can take in order to, you know, very quickly improve on your application, especially during a gap year when you're reapplying or anything like that. So the only difference between the initial submission of your application and the a second application when you reapply is we do require you to have another science letter recommendation. So that's really the only difference, the only, I guess, extra requirement that you would have when you reapply. But other than that, just continue to improve on your application. So once you submit an application, you're not done. You're never going to be done until you actually receive an admit status from our admissions committee. So even though you've already submitted an application, I would still continue to, you know, advocate for you to just continue improving on your application, whether it's extracurriculars or academics or anything like that.
Thank you, Jan.
Yeah, so I think for reapplicants, we kind of, unless you disclose it in your personal statement or anywhere else, secondaries or whatever, of what exactly you did differently, if you want to specify it in a time frame, we, you know, it's really based on the time frame, right? Based on the experiences, if there's any updates since the last application that we can see. But other than that, we don't compare your last application. We don't pull that out and compare it to your new one. However, you know, there are certain things that you might want to consider. There's some metrics which might be obvious to kind of review, but I think my biggest advice would be to also review your narratives, how you describe your experiences, your personal statements. I feel like I see a lot of reapplicants, and that's one thing they don't even ask my opinion about, because they just want to go straight. Well, how can I improve my metrics? How can I improve my GPA? I need to retake my MCAT. But then I look at their application and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, it's probably not your MCAT. It probably wasn't your academic either. So just something to consider. It's not always academic that probably is a reason of not being able to successfully get in.
Thank you. Agasia?
Jam is correct. I actually I'm doing feedback appointments now. Well, we just did some last week, and this is the top thing that I'm getting from reapplicants as well. Sometimes it's not the metrics at all. Like, you really need to look at your personal statement. You really need to look at your secondaries. Did you miss the mark on actually answering those questions in the secondary? Sometimes for many of our schools, we are really trying to hammer home our mission and vision in those secondaries. And if you're not matching our mission and vision there, you're probably not going to get that interview. So take a really good look at that. Advice I also want to share, make sure you're doing a really good reflection of why am I reapplying and what is different about this application, because we're looking for that as well. I'm a file reviewer too, and that is something I look for. We don't have time to pull up your previous application, so that's another misnomer or misconception. Nobody's pulling up your previous application and comparing it to the new one, but I am looking for you to explain what has changed since you last applied. If you don't mention that, I'm probably going to move on from your application. So please make sure you're addressing that in your next application.
Michael?
Yeah, both of those responses I think are spot on. Like take a look at your narrative. The reapplication thing is tricky though, because it depends on whether or not you were interviewed in that previous cycle. So if you didn't get an interview, your approach to reapplying is going to be different than if you interviewed with a school or schools and didn't get in. So and just because you didn't get in doesn't mean there was anything wrong with your application. There are people who are great candidates that we just can't accept everyone. So so you have to be really careful about what how you change your application around. But definitely, I would say it's safe to revisit your narrative. Make sure that you're highlighting the competencies that you want to highlight. And this is where your pre-health advisor comes in. This is where you can really use their services, like have them come in with fresh eyes, take a look at what you're trying to accomplish in the narrative that you create, and are you doing that in your written materials? If you got an interview in the last cycle, you're gonna have to reflect on that interview and think of ways that you could have done better in the interview. Were there any points that you felt you underperformed on in the interview? You're just gonna have to really kind of reflect on that and see if there's any changes you can make in that regard. But be very careful about just making wholesale changes to your application material without giving it a lot of thought.
Thank you so much for that. And I don't think I included a question. So let me just go back and just ask one more question. Interview process. I forgot to add that. If you can just go briefly over, because now, we are coming out of COVID. Are you going back in person? Anything changes because of that? So let's start with Christopher, because he needs to leave soon. So let's get this question out of the way.
Sure. So during COVID, we actually changed and implemented a lot of things. We made a lot of exceptions, and coming out of COVID now, our committee has already started reverting back to pre-COVID rules, I guess you could say. So back then we allowed obviously virtual shadowing and things like that, and letters of recommendations from physicians that you shadow virtually. And things like that have changed. We've gone back to the traditional, I guess, requirements that that we had before. So obviously students are coming back onto campus and things like that. But the thing that's remained the same is for the longest time ever, we've always had a hybrid schedule for our students. So our students are actually only required to be on campus 2 to 3 days per week. So that is still an option. But other than that, everything that we implemented during COVID are now actually going back to normal. So if you have heard of any exceptions that were being made or anything like that, for example, during COVID, because of all the MCAT cancellations, we actually interviewed a lot of applicants that did not submit their MCATs yet. So they were being interviewed and then pending a decision based on whatever the MCAT comes back as. So things like that. Those are the things that changed. But other than that, everything's business as usual.
Thank you so much. Jam, would you mind?
Yeah, so we changed our process. I think during COVID, we're back to traditional interview now because we used to be MMI. So now you will expect to have 2 traditional interview, about 20 minutes each. And so far there might be changes when it comes to in-person versus virtual, but as of now, I can only confirm we're only doing virtual interviews. And the 2 interviews that you do have with us is not going to necessarily be back to back all the time. Sometimes it's different times of the day, and sometimes the interviews are even happening different days. So just kind of an FYI there. But 2 interviews, 20-minute each, traditional questions.
Mark?
We do the multiple mini interview, and we actually give students a choice between virtual or in person. So there is the option there, and we do let students know that we blind our admissions committee to the choice that you make, so that unconscious bias can't creep in on whether or not they're making any assumptions on, who chose to campus and who didn't. So.
Agasia?
Well, our school decided to keep virtual going, and I don't know if that's going to change for the foreseeable future because our staff kind of likes it, but faculty, of course, will have their say, but for upcoming admission cycle, it will be virtual. We have a hybrid approach, so you will have MMI. We have a few stations in MMI, and you will also have 1 traditional interview in the same day. So if you're selected for interview, take that day. Take that whole day. You plan to be with us from that morning to probably about early afternoon. But yeah, we are virtual again for upcoming cycle.
Michael?
Yes, we use traditional interviews and we are still virtual. We're going to continue that for the foreseeable future. Each applicant is interviewed by 1 faculty member and 1 student. Each about 30 to 40 minutes each. They happen on the same day. The interviews are blind. The interviewers don't know anything about the applicant at all. Takes about 4 to 6 weeks after that for the admissions committee to review the evaluations as well as the applicant's application material and render a decision.
That's great. I mean, I think it's great news for students because it's just so much easier if they don't have to travel. However, because they don't have to travel, do you still recommend campus visit? And that came to mind because we had Brewing Day the other day, the undergrad acceptance day when people can commit to UCLA, and it was a big event on Saturday. Everybody was so excited, such high energy. And I feel that students should probably visit a campus if they can, because they're going to be spending 4 years with you. What do you feel? How do you feel about that? Agasia?
Well, since I'm actually responsible for tours that happen in our school, I can definitely answer that question. A lot harder because we are very popular to bring in we're not having public tours at the current moment. Now, we definitely do think that you should see the school before you make a final decision, which does happen if you are accepted. So our admitted students are definitely getting tours and seeing the school before they are able to make that final decision. They're all going to be invited to Second Lick Weekend for us. We just had ours. And then for those that weren't able to make Second Lick Weekend, we have different days that we designate where we can accommodate like maybe an individual student and maybe their family. But we definitely make sure that everyone gets to see the school before they commit to enroll. But as far as tours, before that, keep up with us. We're still in discussions. Yeah, there's only 5 of us in our office, so it's kind of hard.
So Jem, what is UCLA stand on tours?
No tours. No tours, at least before, and I think it's also, you know, economical. It's probably not the most economical to be flying to LA, especially if you're, you know, from out of state, something like that. We do have virtual tours that we recorded, and you can find that in our website. So that's something maybe that can help them at least in this early rounds while they're waiting. But like Agasia mentioned, we also just had our second look. So anybody that are admitted before they make their final decision will be invited to come to campus for that weekend. And anyone else after that, once you got admitted, there's more flexibility when it comes to offering conversations one-on-one and even giving you a partner of a med student to show you around for the day. That's not going to be a problem. But for everyone else who's not in that stage just yet, it's going to be a no.
Mark?
Yeah, we're pretty much the same. You know, we don't necessarily do tours for students before being admitted, but we do have information sessions for prospective students where we have, and they're virtual, so anybody can join from around the country. We have our current students join us for the last hour of that program where you can ask them questions about what the day-to-day life is, you know, for a student at College of Medicine Phoenix. You know, it's not as extensive, or it gives you a good ideas of in-person visit, but it gives you a sense of our culture, and we think that's helpful if you're interested at the prospective student stage.
Michael?
Yes, we cannot provide tours either. We do have an accepted students day where all of our accepted students can come on to campus. We have events whereby they can meet other students and faculty and kind of get to know us a little bit better in that sense. And a lot of our student interest groups plan activities throughout the events happened on Thursday night and Friday. And then a lot of our SIGs, they did events on Saturday and Sunday on their own as well. But as far as tours, we just don't have the capacity for that. We do have on our application portal for those applicants that are accepted, we do have a virtual tour video on there that they can look at, and people are welcome to download a map and do a tour of the walkthrough of this open access areas on their own if they'd like.
So I know that DigiSum has application admissions drop-ins. I'm wondering if any of the other institutions has something like that, or if students have admissions questions where they should turn. So if you want to put a link or an email or something in the chat for students where they should contact admissions if they have any questions. I always encourage students to contact admissions because they should get their information straight from you if they are interested in your school. And I just want to make sure that if students want to take that route, that they have that information. And I'm done with my questions. So let's see. Thank you so much for coming on today and for being here and answering all these questions. And I saw that you answered questions in the chat too. So thank you for multitasking right there. And I will be doing I hope I can, so let me stop share first. And let me stop recording. So thank you everybody again.